Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. You know, like you're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth. Why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable.
Well, I'm very glad I put you on the spot.
Well,
I'm very glad that I've exercised my freedom of speech.
You get my point. It's like you're doing what you should do, which is digging a bit to see what the hell's going on. So and that is what you should do. But you're exercising your freedom of speech to certainly risk offending me. And that's fine. I think more power to you as far as I'm concerned.
So you haven't sat there and... I'm just trying to work that out. I mean...
Ha, gotcha.
You have got me. I'm trying to work that through in my head. Yeah, it took a while.
It did, yeah.
It took a while.
We've met some of your fans, and we got the impression they were all male fans, the ones that we talked to, and that they were struggling with their manhood, and that you give them this message that it's okay to be a man.
It's not okay. It's necessary. What the hell are we going to do without men? You look around the city here, you see all these buildings go up, these men, they're doing impossible things. They're under the streets, working on the sewers, they're up on the power lines in the storms and the rain. They're keeping this impossible infrastructure functioning, this thing that works in a miraculous manner. They work themselves to death, and often literally. And the gratitude for that is sorely lacking, especially among the people who should be most grateful. You see university professors, especially of the social justice bent, who are among the most protected and privileged people that the world has ever produced. They take everything they have for granted, failing to understand entirely that there's a massive infrastructure of unbelievably hardworking, solidly laboring, working class men breaking themselves in half on a regular basis, making sure that everything that always breaks works. And so a little gratitude for that is in order. And it's very useful to tell everyone, not just men, that they have an important role to play, a necessary role, and that if they act properly and honestly and forthrightly, that they can put their lives together and they can help their families and they can make their communities better, and that's not toxic masculinity, that appalling phrase. It's what keeps the world going round. And if we had any sense, we'd understand that instead of doing everything at every possible moment to label what we have in the West as oppressive and patriarchal and fundamentally predicated on power, of all the insane propositions. Anybody who's ever worked for a functional organization knows perfectly well that the organization isn't predicated on power. You have a boss whose fundamental motivation is power. Well, first of all, the probability that he's going to be successful is very low because everyone will be working against him behind the scenes. The people who are successful are good mentors, and they're hard workers, and they're productive, and they're competent, and they do their job properly, and they do everything they can. My observation has been that they do everything they can to find junior colleagues who have potential and possibility and work diligently to further their careers, and find that a major, if not the major, source of satisfaction in their life. Certainly the people I've met in my life who've been very successful, and I've met many very successful people, are thrilled to death when they can find someone who's young and willing and able and conscientious and straightforward and diligent, and they open doors for them in every direction they can possibly manage.
There's a whole philosophy in warfare, which is the strategy of the indirect approach, which means instead of me assaulting you head on, I am going to maneuver around to your flank and attack you from an area where you're not reinforced. And, you know, I always joke with people that we learn the opposite of the indirect approach. We learned that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. So if I've got a problem with Jordan, what I should do is go, hey, Jordan, I noticed that in the meeting today, you talk like this. I didn't like that.
Yeah, right.
And that seems like it's the best way to handle things. It's direct, take that direct approach.
Yeah.
But when I use that direct approach and I attack you, I attack your ego, what's going to happen? Your ego defenses are going to come up. You're not going to want to listen. You're going to be argumentative about the whole thing.
Yeah, we're in a power struggle.
What'd you call it?
Primate dominance hierarchy struggle.
Yes.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yes. We don't want to get into
No,
the
we don't. No. Unless your goal is primate dominance, right? Which is not, well, that's a better goal than abject failure, but it's not the highest goal. No. And a problem like that, if there's a meeting and it goes sideways, the most appropriate approach to that, I would say, is certainly not to ignore it. Although if it only happened once, you could probably file it away for further consideration and not act immediately on it unless it happened again, right? Because you don't want to jump the gun. But my approach in a situation would be something like, I was watching that meeting, and here's a bunch of things that went well as far as I'm concerned. But I thought this one part, to me, seemed to slip sideways. And the discussion got counterproductive. And I'm wondering if you saw that and what you think happened. And that's that embedding it in a more positive message, that's also extremely helpful, because lots of times too, you see when people are negotiating and they're on a trajectory of success, they forget to start the discussion with that. It's like, given that we're on a trajectory of success and these are a bunch of things that you've done right and we've done right, here's something we might be able to improve. Well, that's a lot easier on people. And it's certainly not a strategy of avoidance. And then it does have that investigative quality because you don't know, right? And sometimes you think things went sideways and that was actually the person's intent because they felt that someone needed to be corrected and maybe they're right. Maybe it was time to produce a bit of an emotional disruption and there was a strategy behind it. You don't know. So
that's why it has to be an earnest question,
Yeah.
If I come to you and say, hey, why'd you act like that in the meeting?
Yeah.
Why'd you dress down Fred in the meeting? That was uncalled for. That's just terrible. But if I say, hey, I noticed you went pretty hard on Fred.
Yeah, right.
Was there something going on that I didn't know about? I was sitting there I was a little bit surprised by it. Is there something going on between you and Fred that is not right now? Is there anything I can do to help it out?
Yeah.
And that is a totally different approach. Yeah. And getting back to the indirect approach, obviously it took me 4 sentences to ask you that question.
But you provide some context. And you also don't make the person into an enemy immediately.
Of course.
Because why would you do that?
Yep.
To show you're right. Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, showing you're right has a cost.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Being right has a cost. Just being right sometimes has a cost.
Yeah.
How many times you get in an argument or a discussion with your wife and you get to prove that you're right. Good job.
Yeah. Well, I know there are there are hierarchical levels of right.
Yeah.
Right. You can be right locally and pretty wrong contextually.
Yeah.
Right. And so that questioning approach seems to be much better in taking the fact of that multi-level embeddedness into account.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay. So back to the leadership training per se. So what size are the groups that you like? What's the process that you use when you're invited in by a corporation, for example?
So what we'll start off with is an assessment. We'll go in there, we'll sit down with people, we'll interview people throughout the chain of command, from the junior people to the senior people, and we'll figure out what's happening.
Right, right.
When I ask, the senior person, hey, what's the mission of the company? And they rattle off an answer, and I ask a junior person, what's the mission of the company? And they go, I don't know.
Right.
Or you say, hey, how's your interaction with your boss? Right. And the guy goes, I don't even know who my boss is. Yeah. But you ask the boss and he says, oh, I've got a great relationship with all my people. So we start to
That's
figure
just
out
exploration. Right. So what does this thing do?
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And then once we've assessed it, we figure out what areas they need improvement on. And once we figured out what areas they need improvement on, we go in and we start to formulate plans and we give them instruction on how to cover these problems. And how to overcome these issues that they're
and
facing.
who's we? Who's your team?
So we've got about 15 people that are our actual consultants, our leadership instructors that go in and work with the companies. And we got a bunch of people on the back end that set everything up. But yeah, there's about 15 of us. Some are former military, some are not. Some are just people that were civilians and worked in civilian companies, and they were good leaders, and they really liked what we do, and they understood the way we teach things, and came on board the company. And so, yeah, it's about 15.
And how many companies have you worked with approximately?
A lot. I mean, on varying scales, hundreds of companies.
Hundreds, okay.
And from the actual biggest companies in the world, all the way down to small startups and little construction companies and energy companies, just really everyone. Because
all right, so you're learning a tremendous amount doing that too, eh? Because you get to do an exhaustive audit of all sorts of different complex machines, essentially.
Yes.
Right. And you should get a little bit better at all of them each time you do a new one.
Yeah, and leadership is leadership. It really is. And so it doesn't matter if you're working with an oil company, you're out in the field, or a construction company in the field. These are, hard working people, or a finance company or a tech company. The leadership issues that they have, and not only the problems that they have in those companies are leadership problems. They're not a process problem. It's not that the people aren't wearing the safety gear. It's that the leadership isn't doing a good job of explaining why that gear is important and how it's going to help them. And it's not that people are pushing up against the regulations in the financial company. It's that the team doesn't understand why those are important and how it impacts them. And the leadership is not leading. And so we look at every problem inside of an organization as a leadership problem.
Right. That's the same basic attitude that behavioral psychologists bring to bear in the clinical world, is that if you have a client, for example, who isn't progressing, then that's it's not like the client has no responsibility, but that's also a failure of leadership. You haven't specified the goal with sufficient clarity, the person isn't properly motivated, or you haven't broken the task down enough so that the steps forward are implementable. Now, there's some people, perhaps, who are aiming down pretty hard, and it's hard to find the part of them that would move forward in good faith. Like, I had very few clients that were court mandated. That's just a non-starter, right? Because they're not interested in, they're not playing the game. Their game is the court forced me to do this, right? You can't, there's no leading in that situation, or it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, we'll have most of the companies that we work with are companies that have reached out to us. They want us to come out.
Right.
And they're usually doing pretty well. Like they're doing pretty well. They want to do better.
Right.
It's great.
Right.
And so when we roll into those companies, their attitude is like, oh, you're here to help us. We have open minds. We're ready to listen.
Right.
They've had to put their ego in check to reach out to us. Just for a leader, a CEO of a big company, to say, you know what? We need help with leadership. That's a humble move in its own right.
Yeah, right.
Which, by the way, is why that company is doing well.
Yeah.
They're doing well because the CEO of the company or the COO of the company says, hey, you know what? The market's shifting. We need to make a move. As opposed to the market's shifting, but we'll keep doing what we've been doing.
Why do you think, given that, and I'm certain that that's correct. Like, I've watched really good managers. I worked with a guy who ran a big law firm, and a couple of people who were very good at this, ran big law firms in Toronto, managing partners. And basically what they did was wander around their office and ask people how things were going, like continually. And they'd see a problem and they'd just tap something, a tiny bit and fix it. And so everything just went smoothly. But the reason I'm asking this is because the vision of a leader is more drill sergeant, quasi-psychopath who orders people around. But the reality is that in successful companies, the leaders are people on a quest who are looking to make something good better. And I guess I don't understand why there's such a huge divorce between the stereotypical portrayal of a leader and the reality. I mean, you see movies about great coaches and so forth, or Ted Lasso was a good example of genuine leadership, but that stereotype's still pretty powerful, that parody. And it's just not true.
It's not true in the fact that it doesn't make for great leaders, but there are, without question, tyrannical leaders out there. And look, we saw this in the military. I see it in the civilian sector as well. You can
crack the whip.
You can crack the whip, and you can get promoted, and you can make things happen. You know, you can be a leader that is just a complete slave driver, abusive to your people. The higher ups, what do they see? They see the numbers. They see the metrics being met. Hey, good job, Jordan. You're doing a great job. Meanwhile, your whole team is going to quit, may quit, whatever. They're miserable. You don't care. You just want to get promoted. And one of the things that happens in the military is...
So that power drive orientation can work, and it can work for some period of time. And I think that's right. That's partly why it's also attractive, is like, if you're a real failure and ineffectual in all regards, the tyrant looks pretty attractive. And partly because, maybe it's also partly because if you're that kind of ineffectual failure, that capacity you have for aggression and force is pathetically underdeveloped. And so that makes the tyrant even more attractive, because they have that willingness to grab people by the collar and shake them, that it's not like you forego that because you're moral. You've never been able to develop the skill. But that doesn't mean that that's the highest level of leadership or the optimal level of leadership.
It's absolutely not. And eventually, like you said, it's short term. Now listen, that short term, in the military, generally speaking, you're in command of a unit for like 2 years. So what happens? You show up at the unit, you know, the new boss is around, everyone's a little bit, you know, okay, let's see what this guy's like. It takes them 6 months before they realize, like, oh, this guy seems like he's a bit of a tyrant.
Right.
And then 6 months later, well, you start, we're confirming this guy's a tyrant. Now, 6 months later, you're getting ready to go, you're on deployment.
Yeah.
You hate the guy.
Yeah.
He hates you. Yeah. You're totally dysfunctional. You still do your job, and you do it to the best of your ability, despite working for this tyrannical leader. So you work so hard, and the troops work so hard, they still make this tyrant look good. They're finally ready to have a mutiny.
Yeah.
And the deployment's over, and the guy's getting promoted because the team did such a great job.
Right. So they can find the power mongers can find these short-term niches. Yeah, that seems exactly right.